very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskie, as always. I'm pleased that you have joined us. Now, on the 40th anniversary of the 1937 riots, then Prime Minister Tom Adams addressed our Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, sir, today marks the 40th anniversary of a significant event in the history of Barbados, a day which has been declared by the government to be a day of national significance.
Good afternoon.
The night of July the 26th, 1937,
Tom Adams,
saw the beginning of a revolt that lasted for several days. It is because we are serenely confident of the maturity of our people, because we are profoundly convinced of their wisdom and common sense, that this government resolved that the day when the poor and underprivileged rose in rebellion against intolerable living conditions should be recognized as a day of national significance.
On Wednesday, July 26, Barbados will mark the 86th anniversary of the 1937 riots. In this special edition of My Community, we will visit 3 communities in Barbados and learn of what each guest experienced during that period. We begin in the western community of Paynes Bay, St. James, where a little girl called Margaret resided.
What I can remember, without going into the details, because that naturally I want you to read that in the book, I was at the Alexandra School at the time, my sister and I, and we can remember the bus coming for us, and the driver, who was a very, very gentle man, his name was Branny Cozier, and he, like I said, he was a gentle person. You wouldn't think that he would have a loaded gun. Anyhow, a guy jumped onto the, you know, in those days the buses had a running board, jumped onto the running board, and he said, "Riots, riots everywhere, riots everywhere." And Branny Cozier just pulled open a little dashboard drawer, took out his revolver and said, "Get off my bus." And that stuck in my mind, you know. And then when we got home, then we all, where I was living was in Paynes Bay. Actually, almost in the identical spot where 1 Sandy Lane, Rihanna's apartment is. And that's where we lived. And it was, well, it was a bungalow, but there was an upstairs house that we were all a friendly neighborhood, you know. And the upstairs house was actually, that became eventually the Coach House Inn in Paynes Bay. But that's where another family lived. So all the whites around the area decided they would get together because that was the biggest house. And so the children, we had to sleep on the floor on mattresses, and, you know. And I can remember hearing a gunshot during the night, and apparently this, a rioter, he was coming up the steps to get into the house, and the police from Whole Town, they came along and shot him. I don't think they killed him, but he was shot. And I can remember also we had a cook who I adored. I absolutely adored her. And I was just lying there on this mattress, terrified, because in my mind, something might happen to her because she was black. And it appeared to me that it was a sort of black and white issue. Although it was labor, I know it was labor. They were rioting because they needed more money. And, but at the same time, of course, the planters were all white, you see. So, and in my mind, she was going to be in harm's way. And I was just, you know, I was just lying there. I could not sleep for thinking about I called her Meg. And So more or less, these were the thoughts that went through my head. You know, it wasn't, I realized it wasn't like the movies used to show cowboys and Indians shooting at one another, although it was similar in a way. But it was, and of course the police, the commissioner of police was a white man. So in my mind, because from the time I can remember, I could not understand racial prejudice. I simply couldn't. You know, people were people to me. And you would go into a church, and the whites are all up front, and the blacks are in the back, which was not, it was not legal for the, when I say that. What I mean is, it wasn't like in the United States of America where it was, you know, what do you call the thing? A segregation. It was not forced segregation then. It was segregation more or less by choice, you know. And I simply couldn't understand it. And I can remember sometimes walking along the road in Bridgetown with my mother and my sister. And while we're walking along, black people might be coming towards us. They would step off the sidewalk into the road. I asked my mother once, why do they do that? Well, I mean, my father's not the governor of the island or something like that. What's the... And my mother said, oh, they're very respectful people. And this bothered me because I'm thinking, well, we're respectful to whom? And why aren't we just as respectful, you know? So it was really that the riots definitely had an effect on me. And I couldn't wait to see our cook, Meg, when we went back home and it was all over and everything. And as I said, we had a school bus, and the driver, he's such a nice man. He was like a father to all of us in that bus. And at the school at the time, it was some blacks, but mostly whites, mostly white girls. It was, the headmistress was my aunt, and the deputy head, my aunt too, the two sisters. So they more or less ran the school. And I do remember being told this many years later, not when I was at school, that my aunt, the principal, many of those, the whites that went there were usually planters' children from St. Peter, rural St. Peter and St. Andrew and so forth, you know. And some of them at the meetings for parents and so forth, they were a little bit against my aunt for taking black children. And she said, let me tell you something. If they have the money to pay, because you paid in those days, they're welcome. And I am not going to stop taking them because so there were some blacks there as well. I had two friends. One was black and the other one was white. And the remarkable thing there again to me, you see, the remarkable thing was that during the school holidays, my white friend was allowed to come and spend a week with us, but not the black one. So, and all through my life, I have never been able to understand racial prejudice. And the Alexandra at that time, they did have a sixth form, but of course, my sister and I left before then because we went to England. And it was a nice school. It probably still is, I don't know, but it was a nice school in those days. We used to go to church at the Ash Wednesday and coming up to Christmas time and so forth. And we went to St. Peter's Parish Church. And Spikestown was, I would say, thank God, very much like it is now, but Of course, it has changed somewhat, of course. But I hope that it will remain quaint, as it always was, so quaint. We had Noel Roach's drugstore, and that which is, I believe, that's a bit of a shambles now. I don't know why. But I loved Spikestown. I still love Spikestown. And also, they had a jetty, you know, and the Harrison Line ships used to come in there for the sugar. But I don't know why that ever went out. But
Have you seen anyone traveling on the schooners?
yes, we did. From Bridgetown to Spikestown. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. Yes, yes. Those schooners, there was one called the Sea Fox. Can't remember the captain of that, but that was a famous one. I think that used to travel also to St. Vincent. I don't know if Trinidad or St. Lucia, but I know it used to go to St. Vincent, the Sea Fox.
Interestingly enough, the experiences of the riots are expanded on in Margaret Knight's latest book, The Unstoppable Molly Knight, an autobiography, which is available. I have my copy. Meanwhile, on the eastern side of the island, there is an unusual form of movement. Here is what was occurring as seen through the lens of a 3-year-old Cynthia.
There was a very excited feeling around the place. And I like that because I live in the country, in a little pocket in the country where nothing happened. So this excited feeling really, I like that because that excited me. It was nice. My father was always going to meetings and talking to people. As my mother said, going and talking to the men like he's their father. And the morning of the Riots, I loved the Riots. I really enjoyed them. I was like 3 years old. I was very tall for my age, which helped a lot. When I went to join the rioters, because it looked nice to me, like they were having fun, so I ran across the street to the shop and thought I would go in and get some sweets. Because my mother didn't let us eat sweets. She said they would rot our teeth. That didn't make sense to me. I didn't see how a little sweetie could rot your teeth. But of course, at least he didn't argue with my mother. So while she wasn't looking, I ran out the side and ran in the shop and tiptoed and reached the sweetie jars. They were big glass jars. I pushed and I pulled, so one came crashing down and broke, of course. And the people were barefooted. They started swinging lashes at me. So I just gathered up a few sweets and ran out of the shop and home. My mother saw me coming across the street. So when I came home, she held me, she wrung my hair, she slapped me, and she took my sweeties that I had worked so hard for and threw them in the garbage pail. And that hurt me, it really did, more than the earring and the slap. I lost my sweeties and I was so sad. Anyhow, you could see the people coming down the street. There was what we call the front road, and then there was a little road that led into Merrick's. And they were coming down looking very determined and looking what we call like dread. And they had crocus bags and flour bags in their hand, and sticks. And some people had hoes. And they were grumbling to themselves. And my mother was sitting by the door saying, and apparently there was a rumor that the people were going to kill and beat and kill whoever was on black. And my mother was kind of red. And whoever was rich, they were going to. And my father was a teacher. And we lived in a very poor community. We were poor too, but less poor than the other people. So my mother thought that we were threatened. And of course she had children. That was what happened. So my father had an old piece of gun. So my mother went and took up the gun, got a piece of rag and some linseed oil, and she says, "Now cleaning this gun," and muttering, kill people. Lord, I know you will help me to kill the first man that looking here to trouble my children. So she says, "Now cleaning the gun and praying for the Lord to help her to kill whoever look in there." Anyhow, the people came in, and the shopkeeper is looking out. He used to smile a lot. He's kind of a half Indianish man, and but he was very nice. Used to give people a lot of things. Biscuits were like 12%. Not these square biscuits, a little round hard biscuits that you used to cook. And he's looking out, and the people are coming in the shop, and he's opening all the doors, even those that had been stuck when they painted them. And then they opened them afterwards, so the doors were stuck. So he opened all of them. So the people came in, and they're picking up things and putting in their bags. And I had a big fat woman named Dolly, a big fat red woman. And she took her dress and knotted the skirt in front and made a bag to put things in. So people are picking up things and shopping. But I don't see anybody weighing, and I don't see anybody paying. But it looked like fun, so I thought I would join. So off I went to join and get my sweets, which earned me a slap and a ring ear, and no sweets. Anyhow, the policeman came. We heard sirens, and people started scrambling to get out of the shop. They're scrambling to get out, and Dolly, in her panic, let go of the dress, and everything fell out. And she was really fast. She couldn't come. You know, they had these doors that were half doors. You could open one half. If one half was open, she had to come in sideways. She was really fat. And the people had opened the flaps. And she was so panicky, poor thing. She tried to get through the flaps, and obviously it wasn't possible. So people had to stop and laugh. And then somebody held her and pushed her through a door. And the policemen came on their horses. It looked to me they were trying to ride down the people. They were letting off their guns. I think they were letting them off in the air, but of course they panicked everybody. And I saw a man run from the shop and run into our backyard and go into our outside toilet. So I went and told my mother that there was a man hiding in our outside toilet. So this young policeman came, and he said, "Mrs. Aline, have you seen any of these miscreants around? Have any of them come to your house?" My mother said, "No, I have seen nobody come into my place." And the helper had been just roasted a corn for me. So I went and got my roast corn. I asked him if he wanted a piece. He said, no, he couldn't have it. He only used to wear these white tunics. He said it would dirty up his tunic. I was glad I wanted my whole corn. But my mother sent me to get some lemonade for him, so I got it, and he brought it. And he said, he thanked my mother and said he hopes he meets this level of cooperation everywhere that he goes. But I look at my mother, I said, this is my mother, tell me I must not lie, and she's lying. So I said, but mommy, so she put her hand across my mouth. She said, this child is so traumatized with what's going on here this morning, that she doesn't even know what she's saying. But I hadn't said anything. So after the police, I said, but mommy, I told you. She said, yes, you told me something, but I have seen no one. So that is what I told the policeman. I thought to myself, grown-ups, they can lie in a very sly way. I didn't like grown-ups. I thought they were not trustworthy. They're always looking for a way to find you wrong. Of course, you know when you're little, you think you're big. I thought I was big, and I thought I had more sense than all of them. And the young man went along. And then my mother came, she had a plate, the plate had on rice, and it had on pumpkin, it had saltfish, a couple of slices of tomato. And she gave it with a fork and a napkin. She said, Cynthia, please go and give this to anybody who's not here. So I went out to the outside toilet, and the fella up in the corner, drawn out, shivering like a leaf. And we used to grow cotton. You're not supposed to store the cotton stalks, but they used to burn very well. Our house was fairly high, so my father used to gather the cotton, dry the stalks, and put them under the house. My brother and I used to go under there and play. Because when you're under there, nobody could see you. And you had a time to yourself. You weren't bothered when you were there, because you weren't under anybody's feet, because you weren't visible. So I told him, come on, I'm going to show you where to eat. So I took him under there and let him eat. And I had gone and asked the helper to make a cup of ginger tea for him. So I brought it to him and told him drink the tea first to break the air out of his stomach. And he did, because he drank it, the biggest belch I had ever heard. And then he ate the rice and so on he had never eaten for a year. So when he finished, he said, tell your mother thanks very much. He said, I will pass by now and then to visit. I'm going up on the sea rocks. So I went back, I told Mommy that he had said thanks very much and he would come back to visit us now and then. My mother said, who? What? Come back? I thought, oh dear, grown-ups. Anyway, Gertz had a big shop in Six Roads. And she had one of the first filling stations in Barbados. And she had cars which she used to rent out. Her sons used to drive the cars, Bertram and Merton. They used to drive like demons, and I loved it when they came to take me for a drive. I loved the driving fast. It never occurred to me that it was dangerous. You know, when you're a child, those things don't occur to you. I just knew it was fun to feel the breeze all over my face. Anyways, her son was sitting in the shop against the door. And he was leaning against the door. His mother said, Martin, get up and come from there, come over here by me. He said, but why, mommy, why? I'm comfortable here. He said, get up and come right now. So he argued a little bit. He got up and he went over by her. As soon as he got up, a bullet came through the door. He said, you see what I tell you? I must always listen to your mother. And there was a young policeman, a really nice little man. He was what we call a mounted police, riding about on his horse. And he got such a my cousin who lived with us, because her father ran away to Trinidad after he had impregnated her mother, because her mother was the child of a plantation owner and somebody working on the plantation. And he was afraid that he would have had repercussions from the girl's father. So off he went to Trinidad. So the girl grew up with us like a big sister, and he saw her and he fell in love with her. And he courted her and they got married.
Like Margaret Knight, Cynthia's experiences of the riots are written about in her book, Same Sea, Another Wave, a collection of stories.
Well, writing for me is a catharsis. If things are on my mind and I'm worried about something, I write about it. And that finishes it. Well, Cyril, the people going riot this morning all over Barbados because they're poorly paid and can't feed their children. And they say they're attacking all the white people and all who are black and poor. And your mother read, and because your father's a headmaster, they think that you're all in poor. So your mother taking in front before in front takes she. I am blame she ought to do the same thing. Blow away their backside, attack my children, the drunk or what? Nora's generous behind quivered with indignation, and her pleasant round face creased up in support as she went about doing her kitchen work. I felt good. I had fun. It was lovely and exciting. For some reason at that particular time, I was thinking about the riots and remembering the loss of my sweeties, which is one of my biggest memories, and the fact that the fellow who had hidden her outside toilet did not come back to visit as he had promised it, I thought he was different from the other adults, so he just like all the rest don't keep their promises.
Now, in the neighboring parish of St. John, a young Sylvia became heir and eyewitness to the activities in her community.
I was born 24th of September 1932 in Venture, St. John. My parents, they were shopkeepers. My father's shop was in Venture, St. John, and I lived in Venture, St. John too. And at that time, my mother had a shop in Martins Bay, St. John. Okay, so my father was in Venture, my mother was in Martins Bay, but I used to spend time with my grandmother in Venture. During the time of the riots, I was with my grandmother in Venture, and I had a very good friend called Violet, and she lived with her godfather, and I used to spend a lot of time at her home too. And I remember the day of the riots. Policemen came up on motorcycles in Venture, where we lived. And I was by my friend's home. And when the police fired off some shots, and we went under the bed, and we hid under the bed. Violet and I, we hid under the bed. For me, it was very tense and frightening, okay? Because we were not accustomed to gunshots. And when you heard those going off, of course, you got undercover, okay? So it was a very frightening time. I don't remember a lot of what went after that. But I know that I heard some people saying, we're going up the road, but we're not going to interfere with Beresford Gill. That was my father in the shop in Venture. So they said, we are not going to interfere with Beresford Gill. I remember that much. But my mother now, she was in a shop in Martins Bay. And my two sisters, my older sister Milanese and my younger sister Marjorie, they were in Martins Bay with my mother. And I think it was Milanese because she was the sickly one. She was not well. But my mother was a very brave woman. And she used to sew our own clothes. And remember, she said she had a machine on the counter because she was in a shop too. And she was making some clothes for my younger sister Marjorie, who was a few years old at that time. But she said when the people came the night and they broke the shop doors and they came in, and she said she was from one bedroom to the next calling out for help. And one tell her, she said the man tell her, shut her still mouth in there before he do this and that with her. But my mother, she said the moonlight was very, very bright. And she could remember these people by what they wore during the day. Well, she had a neighbor, and the neighbor had tried to get over to at least take my little sister from, but she couldn't get out. But my mother, the brave woman that she was, she said she went from window to door and shouting, murder, help, help. And one of them, she said she knew the person by name and everything. Tell her, shut her this mouth before he did this and that with her. But she said she could remember each one of them because of what they wore during the day. So anyhow, the police did come. But when they broke out, but she said she could remember and she could tell the police by name who the people were that came in. She said she had a machine tool on the counter because she used to sew our clothes and things, and they took the machine tool, okay? But she could identify every one of them because the moonlight was very bright and she knew them by name. So when the police came and the police asked her if she knew any of the people, and she gave the police the names of all the people that she knew. Well, in those days, you know, you didn't have any, well, no radios and those things, okay. So she wasn't sure about what was going on. But then she got some message saying that nobody had interfered with my father because he was in the shopping venture. And he said when a group of them got there, they said, we are not going to interfere with Beresford Gill. He's a good man. He doesn't give us any trouble. So they did not interfere with my father. It was my mother.
Thank you very much, ladies. This has been a special edition of My Community. 3 Barbadian ladies having been ear and eyewitnesses to the 1937 riots. As we always say here, do take good care of yourself and look out for the interests of your neighbors. The series continues next week at the same time.